Welcome to the January 19th Storage Provider Meetup. We've got a number of exciting topics to cover today, including some really good, some good alpha, some really good info. So stick around and stick around for the whole thing, or if you're watching the recording, be sure to make it to the end because there's a ton of good info that you're going to want to know about. But we'll begin with probably the most obvious topic of discussion for this week, which is the upcoming fork. So it is now January 19th. There are a couple dates that are in the immediate future that you should know about. So January 20th, that's been the remit deadline. So if you would like to get your hands on SPFB and remit your already received rebates, the deadline to do that is tomorrow. So if you've not already done so, then you got to make your mind up pretty soon because that's coming up. The fork itself is January 24th, so that should fall on next Tuesday, but these things tend to be a little bit variable, depending on your time zone, obviously, as well. But it should be around then, so there's a little bit of a cushion. Of course, there is the call that if you haven't already updated to 170, you must do so. This past week, we made it so the Grafana panels and dashboards, they should notify you and tell you if you're not on the latest SPD version. Please don't ignore that warning or anything. It is very pertinent. You will lose your data and payments and collateral and all that if you do not update. So you must be on the latest SPD version. We've done everything we can to short of making it like a siren go off when you visit the webpage or something. We've tried to do everything we can to make it clear what you need to do, what the ask is, and when you need to do it by. But yeah, at this point, time is kind of running out. The vast majority of the network has upgraded, so that's been pretty cool to see. We do obviously have the dashboards for that and the KPI live if you know where to look for it. So that's something that some people in the community have been keeping an eye on, something that we've definitely been keeping an eye on. And at this point, something like 2,500 of the 2,800 providers have updated. So that's pretty good and about where we'd expect to be right now. But there is that last 300 that are kind of dragging their feet a bit. So if that is you, then please take the time at some point over the next few days to like ask in the Discord or follow the link in the Grafana or just really pretty much anything to make that happen, because you need to be updated or it'll be a very bad time for everyone. You'll lose money, you'll lose data, we will lose the availability that your provider is offering. It'll just be a loss all around. So let's help avoid that. Also pertinent to discuss related to the fork is the consensus and kind of block mining side of things. So we have primarily 3 pools on our network. We have confirmed and had confirmed for a little while now that 2 of the 3 major pools, have updated their own nodes and they're fork ready. So that should go smoothly. But however, one of the 3, Sia Mining, we've not been able to get in contact with. We've not heard from directly. So we must advise at this point, since time is running low and it's not looking like the pool operator is going to communicate with anyone, either in our community or even people in other communities haven't been able to reach this person in the past. It's looking like they might not update. So we must put out a call that if you're mining on Sia Mining, you must consider an alternate pool. So that's primarily DX pool and SC Prime pool. Both of those are linked in the consensus mining channel. If you go to the pinned message, both of those pools shouldn't be hard to find. If you're not sure where to look for them, just drop a message in the Discord or something. We'll steer you in the right place. But yeah, we're happy to help people migrate over. But yeah, we're asking nicely, but at the end of the day, if you stay on the outdated pool, all the coins that you're mining will not be real SCP coins. They'll be on the old chain. You won't be able to transfer them to exchange or do anything useful with them. It'll be a bad time for you. Just kind of wasteful all around. So yeah, at this point, we are putting out the advisory to probably migrate off of Sia Mining and toward the 2 pools that have been able to confirm that they're fork ready. So just wanted to include that message fairly early in the call, so I know all of you have kind of heard it. Yeah, at some point in the next 5 days, just move your mining pools over, or move your miners over to the new pool. Other than that, I think the related to the fork, the kind of last thing that I think is worth mentioning in the public discourse, of course, is that uh, while the centerpiece of this new fork is kind of SPFB and what that allows, I think it's still worth reiterating and making sure that we're all on the same page that SCP coins are not going anywhere. Will continue to be the utility token on the network. They are what all contracts will be formed in, or what all contracts will be paid in. They are what collateral still requires. None of that is changing. That's SCP is still the utility token of the network. Um, and yeah, nothing fundamental has shifted there. What SPFB brings is just additional options and incentive layers on top of that. So nothing's being taken away, just new things are being added. So you have the choice. So this SPFB allows us to, create kind of a mix or a more diverse options. While rewarding SCPs, you could consider to be kind of the more short-term reward because SPFB yields value kind of over time. Then mixing in kind of SPFB with some of the incentive structures, so meaning either rebates or potentially incentives like for storage use or other categories. This allows us to make a more kind of diverse and a bit of a hybrid option, which is really cool. And there are a lot of people who will continue to be happy to just take SCP, please, and there will be people that will be hungry to have all of the SPF that could potentially be offered to them because they understand the value. They get that it's a long-term play and they're going to be around for it. So just thought that was worth reiterating. I've seen some confusion around like, are SCPs going away, or is the value of SCP being diminished by the addition of SPFB? And that's not the case. They continue to serve different roles, but the involvement of both of them allows us to create some cool new options. So just thought that was worth saying. On to the next topic, so the relayers. A lot to cover in regards to relayers this week. So the first thing that I'll kind of get out of the way is that the relayer wizard that we touched on a couple weeks ago, that is now live. So if you go to console.xns.tech and you head over to the relayer section, there is now kind of a guided tour to help you set up a relayer. So it'll ask you some kind of questions about what hardware you're running it on. And if you're Linux based, it'll also help you set up the Docker kind of start command. So it'll ask you what folder or directory you want to put certain paths in, and it'll kind of create that start command for you. So setting up a relayer is easier than it ever was before. So we're pretty pleased to get that out. The wizard itself we see as a very important piece of the onboarding structure. So the wizard will continue to be improved. We already have a lot of ideas of things that we could do with it to make that even more slick and kind of polished of an experience. But I think it's already serving its purpose today, and we're pretty pleased with it. So if you're kind of on the fence of setting up a relayer, or if maybe you set one up in the past and it was not as good of an experience as it could have been, then I encourage you to try again with the wizard, and I think you're going to find it a lot more enjoyable. So that is now live. Of course, development continues on all fronts. So a couple things that I think are worth mentioning that we are internally kind of working on with our core developers and integration with other pieces. None of these are in any particular order, and like no official announcements can really be made. But some features of the relayer in particular that we are giving attention to and focus on that we see as important are things like cache segmentation. So that allows, cache on the relayer. So that itself, you can kind of split into upload cache and download cache. But even within those, we're exploring the option for different kind of priority levels. So some uploads could be considered kind of less priority and other uploads considered kind of more priority. That would be a pretty powerful and interesting feature and makes sense for a lot of kind of organizational and enterprise level use. We're also developing immutability of data. So that's a pretty important tag to be able to add. So immutability gives some kind of protection and insurance around if the data or the relayer itself or were to somehow be compromised, or if some disgruntled employee or something were to try and nuke the whole thing, then the data that's been tagged with immutability would essentially say no. And that's data that you can count on being there because it has been marked in such a way that it can't be changed um, and it can't be deleted or anything. So that will give an option that's useful for a lot of different use cases. That's something else that we're working on as well, something that we've kind of alluded to and is continuing development because this is a pretty powerful but a bit of a complex piece, is concurrent and multi-relayer. So the meaning there is that right now, each relayer itself, kind of set up on one machine, is considered kind of one single cloud. The way I kind of think of it is that each relayer setup is almost like its own cloud, but there is some use that makes a lot of sense for having multiple relayers on potentially multiple different premises, all working from the same database. So all kind of working and having access to the same files. And that would make a lot of sense, I think, and enable some new uses. So that's something that we are working on as well. Nothing really that I can talk about specifically because there's a lot of complexity that gets involved of like, okay, well, if I change a file on one, how quickly does that update on the other? Like how real time is it? That is something that it could be kind of a rabbit hole of its own to fall down of complexity, but we are definitely working on that at the moment anyway, of allowing multi-relayer options. So you can set up a relayer in one place and maybe pull down a file in another. That would open up all sorts of opportunities. Lastly, as well, for geolocation zones, so we've already displayed our kind of provider map. I think we call them provider profiles in the UI. So that's the ability to set up a relayer and be able to choose any kind of mix of countries that you want to store data in. That's something that is really powerful and I think is kind of displays a lot of the strengths of our cloud. The fact that we have such a diverse network that is operating in I think like 150 countries or something like that. We have tons of capacity all over the place, and I think it really kind of shows the strengths of our cloud that you can open up a map and say, I want to store in this combination of countries precisely. But we are going to as well be providing kind of preset geolocation zones. So there could be things like an EU zone, so you're not having to pick out each of the countries yourself. You could do like Canada East, Canada West, those kinds of things. So even within a country, you can choose regions, and that's going to be very powerful as well. So that's on the way. But more immediately than that, even, we do have a relayer release that we're preparing at the moment. This will include S3 file system compatibility improvements. So these are things that we've been working with some of our team on S3 integrations, and some of the wrinkles that they've come up with or been able to find and reproduce. This features some improvements to how certain things are handled or certain quirks with different apps. So this will just overall create a more smoother and polished experience with some popular apps. So always happy to be able to improve that point, as well as faster downloads. So these are improvements to the actual core like host.io software and its different components. So we've put a lot of effort into uploads being faster in the past, and we've got those to a point that are really powerful. And then we've actually released some figures on that. So we have been able to sustain on like an 8-hour upload. We've been able to sustain like 6 to 7 gigabit per second, which is pretty powerful. And on some shorter sprints, like 7.5 to 9 gigabit, which is pretty awesome. So those are up in on an article on our site. These went live at the kind of toward the end of 2022. I think we've touched on them before, so that's not entirely new. But I am pretty happy with our performance, and always happy to bring that up. But at this point, we've then kind of started sprinting some of the download improvements as well. We had some ideas for how we could improve downloads, make them faster, and we're at the point where downloads are kind of approaching or even surpassing the speed of uploads. So that's excellent as well. Happy to put that out, and that's also included in the release that we are preparing. On top of that, there's just some general bug fixes, some with the UI, some with the software itself, and better integration with the wizard. So there was a specific quirk, I believe, where if you're using the Linux kind of Docker-based uh, relayer, and if you use the wizard for kind of startup environment variables, sometimes if you start the relayer like container with certain settings, then those wouldn't always be passed to the UI. So that's getting fixed as well. So just overall, some kind of housekeeping, general cleaning up of things, but also some pretty meaningful fixes and improvements and abilities being added as well. So on top of everything that we just touched on in regards to the wizard being live, the release that we're preparing immediately, and some of the features that we're working on and are in development, we are also pretty happy to be able to tease some hardware that is being prepared. So not going to announce anything specific today, but we are beginning the kind of development and procurement process to put out some relayer hardware options. So um, these will likely be able to kind of have high end and potentially more kind of low to medium end options. So since the relayer itself is highly scalable, so it can serve kind of a single person or like a single environment all the way up to like small to medium teams and yeah, like SME, SMB type things. The relayer itself, yeah, we've every part of the architecture is very scalable, and that will likely be reflected in the hardware options as well that we're able to offer. So nothing specific to announce today, but I want you to know that we are developing that, and that's likely to be a pretty important part of our ecosystem moving forward, to have not just kind of relayer hardware, but different integrations that are possible. And what I would like to tease now, because this is kind of leading into the next segment, but potentially some mixing of storage provider and relayer kind of together. So your storage cloud, if you're storing data in the cloud, that doesn't have to just be a cost. That can also be a storage kind of generator as well, or a profit generator as well. So I would like to now invite up to the stage our team leader, our kind of project head, Ken, who is going to discuss some of the development on the storage partner end. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good overview of the current status of the relayer product and where we are at it. It's a very confusing situation right now in some ways on the relayer because it's really kind of evolved in some ways that we were not really expecting. And so I'm pretty pleased with the potential that we have in front of us because the vision is really starting to become clearer. And, let's leap forward a little bit and talk about what we looked at a few years back when we talked about relayer provisioning and how it would all function. The whole sort of end goal was to get to a stateless relayer and disintermediating the database and putting that, into a permissionless layer. And I still obviously believe that that is our end goal, and it's probably 1 to 2 years away. But everything that we do in between now and then, I think, is going to be pretty cool and pretty interesting, and will help us to sort of understand the best way to get to the stateless version of this thing. So what I want to do is talk about the partner program, and the relayer is really important to the partner program. And I think that part might be not as clear to everybody who had been thinking about becoming a partner or, selling storage, repping storage, doing whatever. But the way I'm going to sort of explain it here is giving the community, as always, a sneak peek to an event I expect to post and host next week for partners in general. So that will be sort of the official formal event launch that we'll have. We've already launched the program, but that will be kind of like the full, thing. This partner program is really cool. I think what's going to end up happening is that partners are going to wind up being the 80/20 mix in terms of how we bring storage onto the network from real customers. I think we made that pivot, I mean, 18 months ago, but we didn't really know what it looked like. We didn't know what it meant. We didn't know how we were going to offer it. We just sort of assumed that, people were going to trust consultants more than they were going to trust, new clouds. And I don't think there's any dispute over that. Wasabi shows up, couple of industry vets stitch together a bunch of spare data centers and ultimately, plaster the site with 80% off Amazon. And, they haven't really made that big of a dent into the business, right? The cartel still owns everything. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft still hold 65% of the thing, and they can charge the cartel pricing. And everybody else that wants to come in and do, cloud offerings is going to have to accept their portion of the 35% until somebody actually, really shakes up the game. Um, and who knows how that's all going to play out, but the whole notion here is that partners are people that have trusted relationships with SMEs and enterprises, and ultimately partners have the bandwidth and background to have accumulated enough knowledge to be able to correctly specify and determine what any individual given company really needs, in terms of, connecting to the cloud. And one of the things that we're sort of seeing right now in this kind, and it's kind of like waves, on the water, in that um, for a long time there was this real sort of rush of enterprise to the cloud, and then there's kind of been a back, kind of a splash where now a lot of people are really more focused on a hybridization and a mixed cloud, and that's really where the focus tends to be, and all of the sort of the hot activity that's going on. Raw S3 object storage in the cloud isn't terribly sexy anymore. It's really, everything else that goes on. So let me start by saying that in this partner program that we're offering now, it's open to anybody. I mean, certainly anybody in the community can apply. But the response that we're giving to most people right now is, if you don't already do this, if you don't have some customer relationships, if you're not already in the business of, helping specify, consult, or decide with a company, whether it's a company you're involved with or whether it's, working for other companies, we're probably going to put you into a category that puts you on hold, and, you won't come into the program immediately. The program currently is going to be focused around specifically people that can bring actionable storage to the network quickly. So we're going to give a couple of partners our full attention for the next, couple of months or quarters, or whatever ends up happening. I think we'll probably end up finding and meeting a lot of partners pretty quickly once they realize what the program is. But to begin with, right now, it's probably going to end up being a handful of partners, maybe five, that really kick the thing off. But what the cool thing is about it, if you are interested and you do think you want to make a transition into it, or you think you can now go out there and start offering this, and so this does seem to be like something you want to really drive forwards on, is that it's really a little different than what you might think it is, right? It isn't just going out there and specifying, hey, I can get you, S3 object storage at a, significant discount to the cartel, and it's more secure. We have, all of the features that we've always talked about. That's certainly there, but it turns out that that's not really the majority part of this whole process, because what's going to end up happening is we're creating this ecosystem that I think we've kind of had illuminated for us over the last, 18 months. And so partners are going to have a whole bunch of products to offer. and they're all going to fit together like a puzzle. And so we're going to end up having a lot of training and certification that will go along behind it. And so partners will qualify for discounted or free training in our cloud certifications that we put together that Henry will be working on, or he's working on right now. Those pieces, we will want to get as much training into the partner channel as we possibly can. Um, so when I say there's going to be multiple product offerings, let me just sort of describe that ecosystem a little bit, so that you understand kind of what I'm talking about. And I think it'll, maybe some lights will go off, and if not, then you can think about it. But um, what we sort of started out with here was, originally when we brought this whole thing together, we said, well, look, we need to, build this S3 compatible, gateway tool, that can get onto the network and cover all of the, the sundry stuff that has to do. And then, people will just come flocking to it because of security and price and blah, blah, blah. And then we started to understand, there's probably not that many people in the world that are going to do this whole DIY thing. That at the end of the day, there's a number of hobbyists out there that will build a network, but most folks are not going to be in that mode where they want to do that. So what you have to kind of do is simplify it, turn it into a commodity kind of a device, and so forth. And that's when we started developing the Examiner. And so the Examiner, started selling in the, last in 2021, and it did okay in the beginning, middle part of its launch. But then as we got to the end of the year, all of a sudden, everything just sort of materialized. We realized then exactly how this can work. Um, because essentially people came along and saw what Helium was doing, and that drove everybody to start looking at other passive income projects. And of course, we got some nice, video work done. I don't want to really comment on it, but at the end of the day, there was some good messaging put out there. Um, and it drove people to us and ultimately showed us what could happen. And to our detriment today, I made a strong decision to protect you people, in that we said we would only sell 1,100 units. That's where we put the end on it because of the supply chaining and because of what I knew it was going to do to the network. Um, I could have sold 5,000 units, and had I sold 5,000 units, we'd probably be in a lot different place right now, simply because of the treasury, issues that we have in front of us and so forth, that we wouldn't have, that we do actually have in front of us today. But the network would have exploded, and ultimately everybody would be in pain right now, and there'd be a lot of accusations, and it would be a very challenging environment. And instead, it's a pretty good environment. We have a pretty rock solid network and a bunch of people that really are committed to it. And ultimately, I think a very strong base to move up. Also, had we sold 5,000, I'd probably be in Thailand or something right now. So, there's that. But the deal is that with the Examiner, we showed what can happen. Now, if you compare it to Helium, their miners are something like $600 on average. And so at the end of the day, you can't really say our network is going to grow to be sort of identical to Helium. And so we've got, 996,000 units left to sell, right? It's not going to be like that, because I would suggest, probably you could do sort of a calculation to say on average, one of our good solid anywhere between 16 and 64 is going to substitute for, say, maybe 4 to 6 of their units. So we probably have a couple hundred, maybe 300, 400,000 nodes to really shoot for over the next, 2, 3 years. Think about that for a second. 2 to 300,000. There's 2,800 units on the network right now. Let's say there's 280,000 coming. So that's a 10x, or 100x growth of the network, um, that we have in front of us. Well, I'm here to tell you that just those 1,100 units that we put on the street generated a tremendous amount of, revenue into the corp, and really did allow us to put the team on that we've had over the last 14 months and has allowed us to actually do all the development that we've done. And we've done a lot. So for partners, a lot of that node sale work is going to pass off into them now. I mean, we're still obviously going to, be selling units direct, but I expect that partners are going to be selling the lion's share of examiners going forward. And I don't mean manufacturers. I mean, literally our partner channels. So the examiner is really the core piece that goes into the partner offering. The object storage is there, and we'll provide a discounted price directly to the partners for selling, storage. We'll also have the capability to offer white label storage. So if you're a big enough MSP that you want to actually brand the storage somewhat differently, or you want to put it onto a device of your own, that ability will exist, and there will be some things. And by the way, we already have a legal contract ready for partners, so we can do all that immediately with anybody that wants to sign up. And then there's this relayer, and this is where things really start to get interesting because, okay, so you're saying, well, look, I can go ahead and hang a shingle out there and I can sell examiners. I don't know how well that's going to do. Nobody's buying examiners these days, and I don't, blah, blah, blah. Well, you have to kind of understand how this whole thing works. And helium really missed it, and I missed it for the longest time. I kind of see it now very clearly, and I think the people over at who develop helium probably see it pretty clearly too. And I'm pretty sure that they're ultimately going to fulfill the dreams of their network, but maybe not at the level that they oversold their network, right? They really went a long way selling 1 million nodes. If we had 280,000 nodes stood up right now, there'd probably be law enforcement outside, right? Or some other weird thing, because it just wouldn't make any sense. You have to have both sides of the equation, right? And the whole beauty of this thing, and it's actually interesting because we do have a guest in the audience today, but the thing that I've always been enamored with here, and what caught me back in 2017 was this notion of the simplistic nature and yet very robust feature set that could be built off of this low level renter host protocol. And that does imply two sides of a house that have to be fulfilled, and you can't focus on just one to the detriment of the other, because what happens is you end up, like in our case right now, 2,800 nodes, you got a lot of mouths to feed, and so people start to get antsy when the storage flat lines, and they start asking, is this all there is? And pretty of course it gets worse. You've heard some of the things people have said, but the deal here is that what, instead of doing like Helium did, is get on a big exchange, wait for the crypto cycle to come around, and then just slather the entire network with a bunch of advertising and sell off 1 million nodes, and then make everybody unhappy because nobody makes any money and there's nothing on the network, and the grand total of monthly revenue is something like $6,000. That can't work. But if you can do it sort of in a hand in glove kind of way, where okay, you push one side up the field a little bit and then you focus on the other side, and together they kind of work together hand in glove, what you can do is something pretty fantastic. You can build out a network that can truly rival the cartels, and you can do it in a way that generates a lot of revenues for everybody, right? The network, the partners, the team, to keep developing, to grow, and to get more people on board to do the work that we need to do, and the stakeholders that put money in behind it. And so you can start throwing off dollars every different direction in ways that make sense, right? In ways that do actually work. And so part of that then is getting that storage sales growth going to start feeding the examiners. So the relayer is that process. Well, the biggest problem with the relayer that I've always had, and when I thought it up way back when, and said this is going to need to be a thing, I always knew that it was not going to be well received immediately. You can't just simply say, well, it's more secure, and it provides this encryption end to end, and and it's going to do all of this, sort of, preparation work before delivering to the distributed network, and then you finally land on the last piece, which is, it's probably its most important piece, but at the same time, is it enough to excite people? Where you say, well, your possession of your data never leaves your facility or your purview until it's ready to go up to the distributed network. We never own your data. I mean, that's a big thing. It is a big thing, but it's probably not enough for most businesses to go ahead and surrender a bunch of money, um, when they can just say right back to the sales rep, well, I don't have to do that for AWS, or I don't have to do that for these other guys. And yeah, I understand that, but I kind of trust those guys. So, I just care that it works. I don't really, need to know about all that. I think that'll change over the coming years, and I think that will become a much more important component in the sales process. But for today, it's an impediment, right? It's an overcome that the salesperson is going to have to get past in order to sell the storage. So it's actually really cool that the world is kind of backsplashing into this hybrid cloud kind of thing, because what we can build is we can build rack mountable, NAS configuration. We can provide some things inside there, so some network file systeming. We can add some back end stuff where everything that you're working on in this corporate NAS then gets fed into our cache, and then if we decide to do persistent or prioritized or whatever, immutable, whatever we've decided to segment the cache off into, at some point then it gets pushed upward into the distributed network. So now we're starting to talk about giving that relayer some real beneficial functionality for the enterprise. And because they're already buying these devices in droves anyway, right? They're buying them from 100 different vendors like Cloudian, and I could name off a whole bunch of them. But at the end of the day, they're already buying these devices. So if we make this device have that kind of functionality and keep driving that functionality into it, even including things like, bundling in things like Veeam or Commvault or other really digital asset management software, making partnerships with those folks, and allowing them to have premier spacing on the device and so forth. Those devices can ultimately sell themselves as hybrid cloud devices, as much as they are sort of Trojan horse to get sales storage up onto the network. So selling relayers, I think, is going to be very, very good business and very big business for the partner folks that are in there. So I've just described all the products, and that alone is, if you see it, you see it, and it's pretty cool. And you'll have the ability to make 20, 30 points or whatever it is off of all of the pieces that are put there. And so anybody who's worth their hustle is going to be able to go out and make a good living selling our network. I just really feel that. But that's not really it. I mean, what's it is how it can all dovetail together, and how the consultants, and we're going to have to do a lot of teaching around this, but I can just, the vision is really here and I can really see it. And so the real key right now is for me to kind of help you to see it, right? And help the partners to see it, and to build the tools and videos and materials so that they can quickly and easily see it. And pretty soon, at some point, people will look at what we're doing and they'll say, wait, everybody should be doing it this way. And the reason why is pretty simple. Right now, when you start uploading a lot of stuff to the cloud, it's a big cost. And it's worse than that, because it's not just a big cost, but in most cases, it's an unknowable cost. And it turns out to be a situation where a lot of times enterprises, SMEs, get really surprised because certain events occur, different kinds of usage patterns, show up, and next thing you have is you've got the CFO showing up saying, what the heck is going on here? Our cloud storage bill just went from 40,000 to 180,000 this month. Should I pay it? And how do we tell the CEO? And so that kind of a conversation has been a very sort of difficult scenario, and a lot of the smaller clouds have taken advantage of that. But we actually have an interesting sort of overcome to that that's a little different. So Wasabi and Backblaze and all those guys, their idea is, well, 80% off the big guys, and we can even maybe do better if you do certain things and so forth. Um, and no egress, so if you download a lot of stuff, you're not going to have to pay for it. So no vendor lock in. Oh, and no API touch fees. So if you're having a lot of, crazy access because of the app you wrote or whatever, we're not going to ding you and get you really hit there. So it's a good story. I mean, it is. It's a good story, and we can sell it. It is the story we're going to sell. Our cloud is that. It's a out the door cost per terabyte, no egress, no API. We pick up the price difference between data and parity. We're going to pay for that extra layer of security. So at the end of the day, it's a good story, and we do offer it and we do sell it, and that's going to help partners, I think, a lot. But our partners are going to be able to have this conversation and say, but let's just think about this for a second. Let's blue sky a little bit. What if instead of you having to pay us, $50,000 a month for the next 60 months to, store all of this data in the cloud, and let's, not mix words, that 50,000 a month is going to be a great savings for you over your current thing. But what if I can give you a way that after 2 or 3 years, you're not actually paying for cloud storage anymore? You don't pay me, I pay you. What if I turn your cloud storage into a profit center? And that's a question that's going to cause a lot of people to raise eyebrows, right? And so how does that happen? Well, we know we have to get from 2,800 nodes to 280,000 nodes. Well, we're not going to sell them all to Uber drivers and DIYers. And I mean, it's pretty clear that the Netherlands is going to buy like 200,000 of those nodes, but still that's 80,000 that have to get done, right? So I'm joking, of course, because I don't know why that little part of the world really goes nuts over this stuff, but they do. But 280,000 nodes we're going to have to sell. And so, we'll sell a lot to just passive income earners. There'll be a lot of people that just want to make a little extra money and put a node in their closet. And that's a great story. It's a great idea. It's a great way to disintermediate a lot of the ESG stuff that's going on with data centers right now. But I still, even there, I don't think we're going to find enough quickly to do what we want to do in a performant kind of way. And what I mean is, yeah, we'll probably get a lot of people that will be able to jam a device in on a 30 megabit per second upload, connection. But I don't know that that's really going to be something that we're going to be attracted by, right? I mean, at some point, all of those combined do create a performant profile. But if we start finding a lot of folks that are already at gigabit or better, which is typically what you find when you start looking at business connections, then suddenly we have an even more robust and performant cloud than we already do. And it already is pretty performant, as Henry has mentioned. So the notion is that when you go into a sales call to talk about selling cloud, you talk about selling that customer 5, 10, 50, 100, 1,000 examiners to go along with their relayers, right? And some customers are going to be more, suited to this kind of business than others. Certain kinds of franchise businesses, for instance, where they can spread out the devices. Let's say you talked with a bank who had a bunch of ATM kiosks scattered around. That's like a no-brainer, right? I mean, put one of them in every single one of those ATM kiosks, and you're just styling immediately. You got internet, you got a secure lock on the door, you've got everything you need, right? So that's kind of like a natural, and there's a lot of those little naturals. The one where you have 5,000 people that are all in one tightly, congregated building, maybe not quite as valuable to put a bunch of them there, but still not a bad one. It's still not a bad, sell. They can stack a whole bunch of these units up and set them side by side, or put them together as long as, I mean, it could end up being even high density type nodes, 4U nodes running multiple virtual machines, but at the same time, it's still multiple nodes. But here's how that all works. When you get the relayer set up for the customer and you start determining how you're going to choose your provider sets, and right now the provider sets are pretty cool. You can choose countries, you can choose, give me performance over or uptime over 95%. We don't yet have the performance tags in the current public facing relayer, but they're done. They exist. We can push them out to you. We have about 4 or 5 tags that we can push out to you that will give you the ability to granularly choose the provider set that you need to choose. But so here you are as the consultant, you say, well, look, here's the deal. I can choose 50% of the nodes on this relayer can be my own, right? So the company buys, let's say, 10 examiners and one relayer. They can choose those 10 examiners and upload as much as 50% of the data to the examiners that they own and control, leaving 50% of the storage space there for the rest of the world to use, right? And then ultimately, they do have to choose other public relayers for the other 50% balance that they're actually using. So that gets the rest of the network watered and fed as well. The first question is to me, well, why don't we just stand up servers and just host this stuff in house? Well, the whole idea of the Examiner is it really doesn't require any care and feeding and IT management at all. The whole notion is we're at version 1 in the software and it's already pretty self-sufficient. Pretty soon these things are going to just be put them in a closet, forget about them, wait till you get a phone alert telling you have to replace a drive, and then that's it. That's all there is to it. You pull the drive out, you put it in a FedEx envelope, you send it back, we send you a replacement, shove it in, and you just go. So it's a completely different thing than the IT team having a new thing they have to manage and so forth. It's not that. It's something completely different. So I don't think that's an objection that's going to really get in the way. And in some places, ultimately, these people are going to really buy into it and see it big, and they'll just put a ton of these units in there because they'll be able to see the same things that you see, right? They'll say, well, look, by year 3, 4, or 5, all of the subscription revenue coming in from companies that don't want to own examiners and don't want to do that, or need to put their other 50% out there on the public network, will start to fill these units up, ROI the units pretty quickly, and ultimately start feeding money back to us, in terms of profitability, instead of us actually spending for the cloud services that we have. That's a game changer. It just is. It's a game changer. And when we get that message out there and we start showing it in use case and case study work, and there's, projections that we can clearly show how, 80% off, why does it even have to cost anything? Why can't it be zero? That is going to be a really big thing for partners. And so, you're going to be able to go into an account, sell a relayer or multiple relayers, depending on how it's set up, sell a bunch of examiners, and then sell a bunch of storage. And then what ends up happening there is you get a really nice paycheck or payday off the original sale and the installation. And then the rest of it's subscription revenue, right? So I think we're going to build a wonderful partner network. And I think if you aren't in that mode of being a partner right now, but you do have the capacity and ability to leverage relationships with SMEs and corporations, you're really going to want to consider this, because this is going to be an answer. And I think it's going to be a really good answer for a few people. And a few people, earlies, as earlies always do, by the way, and they always do it at this point in the market when everybody thinks it's all dead and it's going to go away and everybody's going to quit and leave and sell. And even some of our stakeholders, it's so classic. I wasn't here in 2015 and 2016. I kind of wish I was, but in 2018, watching the teeth gnashing and seeing how it all played out, it was pretty clear to me how it worked. And so this time around, I'm sanguine about it, but also I also find a great deal of humor in it. I know that's not very good. It's a lot of Schadenfreude there, but anyway, I think at the end of the day, if you're interested in this sort of thing, you should sign up for the program. Even if we don't take you on right away, we will put you into a category of folks that we will contact. We will be setting up a good, solid training and introductory one of these presentations to kind of go over exactly what the product is, exactly what the hardware relayer looks like. We're in the process of designing those right now. We're building the SKUs, getting those put together. They will go up on the Examiner website, so anybody will be able to buy them. You won't necessarily have to buy them from a partner. But I think what will end up happening is that partners will be able to provide extra value adds. So again, I think 90% of Examiners and relayers and all of that sort of stuff will flow through the partner thing. Anyway, that's the sort of overview and gist of it. If there's some questions, we'll take them now. If not, we'll push it off into the sort of launch event that we expect to host next week. And I'll let Henry look into the audience to see if there are some questions.
A question I had was in regards to also talking about to selling storage and Examiners to big corporations, especially the ones that might have locations dispersed throughout the country, is that I would imagine in most of these cases, most of these businesses have server racks and that sort of thing, and the current version of the Examiner might not fit in very well with that. Are there current plans on, building like a 2U or something like that that businesses like that would use?
Yeah, so you actually touched on two things there that will go into the launch event that I didn't actually mention. So yes, we are looking at other Examiner form factors. There's a couple of pretty powerful directions that we're looking at there. So the first one goes right to the heart of what you just said, more of an industrial kind of an Examiner configuration, rack mountable, maybe larger, all that kind of stuff. Possibly even, as Henry alluded to earlier, with potentially Examiner relayer combos, even as potential things that we might offer. But the other side of it is, and partners can sell licenses too. And this is already a thing, by the way, with our two manufacturing friends. But partners will get a good discounting on software licenses. And everybody here knows that the licenses actually, yeah, there's some wrinkles, but the licenses have installed pretty good, and the whole process has actually gone pretty smoothly. And the full software has done well for us. And I think ultimately over the next, once we get to a version 2 and 3 on the software, those things are going to be simple for people to manage and install and set up as well. So it's quite possible that we do end up with a lot of quote unquote DIY, but it's DIY that's partner driven, right? It's DIY where the partner goes out and says to the enterprise, well, look, if you've got 47 of these kinds of workstations scattered around your campuses, I can throw this software on there and it just runs in the background, and you don't have to even worry about it, and it doesn't take up much of a footprint and blah blah blah. That's where it's going to be. Look, at the end of the day, most of the money that comes off of an Examiner unit today or now is actually the software license and then whatever margining we put on top of it. So software licenses will be the second tier, along with some different form factors. Another form factor, by the way, that we're talking about, and this is probably going to be something that we'll have a lot of flex on, but we're probably going to do something smaller. But when we go smaller, there's this idea about a one drawer drive, which is, okay, I mean, that might be a thing, but more, I think, is going to be a thing where we do an all NVMe configuration, where we really strive to pull a lot of, disk performance out of these units and then pair those up with really high bandwidth installations, so that ultimately what that allows us to do is to tier off the network, a lot more with a lot wider range than we currently have. We have a pretty good range right now. And we will be doing some tiering. So one of the things in the object storage sales that partners will be able to do is they will be able to choose certain provider sets that actually provide higher performance, higher uptimes, higher, just ultimately higher. And obviously, if you just set the network up and let everybody just have their way, they would all choose the highest performing nodes. And then ultimately, in a marketplace world, what would end up happening is that those prices would then balloon off the charts, and that would then start to come back down into a competitive environment. In our case, because we always bound things through the incentives program, what we'll end up doing is we'll take those top tier performers and we'll just pay them more on incentives, right? And ultimately, the way we get that to pay them is we are able to charge more from the customers for the top tier performing things. Now, this is all pretty much doable today with the way the whole thing works and the infrastructure that's set up. It just isn't exposed or abstracted yet in the relayer UI, and that's the part that James is currently working on to spit out. So, as usual, I gave you about 10 times the answer to the question that you asked, but hopefully it helps.
No, I appreciate you expanding on that. I'm thinking of some potential partners and just the kind of questions that they would have. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll kind of do a last call for questions or comments, but if nobody has any, then we're not going to hang around too long. We've already gone about an hour, which is typically what we aim for. So, yeah, we covered a lot this week. I think this is going to be one of the storage provider meetups that maybe you come back to and listen to a year from now and realize some of the significance of what we covered. Very exciting. Happy to have been able to host it this week. Of course, so see you all around the SC Prime Discord. Keep an eye on the Fork and the Fork News. We'll probably be pretty good about keeping the community updated on what's happening there. But yeah, the fork itself, once again, is dated for the 24th. The kind of call to action. So be sure that you're on SPD 1.7.0 if you are not already. About like 95% of the network has upgraded, but there's a last kind of chunk that are dragging their feet. So hopefully this message reaches them. If you have any friends that you maybe set up a storage provider with and you're not sure if they have updated their storage provider or not, then maybe reach out to them, check on them. And yeah, if you're running an ASIC miner as well and you're mining blocks, then be sure that you move off of Sia Mining Pool and onto either DX Pool or SC Prime Pool, as they are fork ready, and it will be a very bad time for mining if you remain on a pool if you remain on Sia Mining, which is not updating. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us this week. Hopefully you learned a lot. I think there's a lot of very good info. Maybe need a couple days to digest some of it, but yeah, a lot to chew on, and keep an eye out for next week on some of the announcements that might be coming then. Thanks everyone, and take care.